Chapter 41. Venom burned on the back of my tongue at the thought of hunting with Bella, and excitement coursed through me at the prospect of finally sharing this portion of my life with her. I no longer needed to shield her from this part of me, of my nature, and now it would never separate us again. But Bella resisted my pull, her eyes widening with shock, dismay washing over her features. I smiled a little. For most newborns, who were all instinct, the urge to go hunt was so strong that it happened unthinkingly, with practically no reservations. That was how I recalled it, for myself and others. But Bella was so very calm and controlled. To her, the idea of hunting must seem like a very surreal concept. She didn't realize yet that when the scent was close enough, instinct would take over, no matter what kind of control she was displaying now. Of that I was sure. "It's quite easy, love," I said, my voice encouraging. "Instinctual. Don't worry, I'll show you." But her expression remained stiff, unsure. I raised my eyebrows with a grin, trying to lighten her fears. "I was under the impression that you'd always wanted to see me hunt, even when I had been more likely to end up hunting her." Bella's expression shifted quickly, warmth lighting her eyes as she suddenly laughed. Her eyes seemed far away for a moment, maybe filled with memories. I gave her a second to adjust. "Shall we?" I reached up and ran my fingers slowly down her throat, thinking that her burn was probably tenfold my own. After everything she had been through the last few weeks, she shouldn't have to endure any more pain. "I don't want you to be hurting," I said softly.
"I'm fine,"
Bella said dismissively.
"Wait. First."
"Yes?" said Carlyle with interest.
"I want to see her. Renesmee."
She pulled her hand out of mine, clutching the gown at her stomach. Her eyes suddenly glazed over with emotion. Jasper sensed loss and confusion. "No way, Edward," he thought quickly, his expression strained. "At least not until she's hunted." Alice's eyes unfocused for a moment.
I can't see Renesmee, and Jacob's in the way too. I don't think."
She looked unhappy. Alice didn't like denying Bella any more than I did, but she thought it was a bad idea. I knew I had been foolish not to give this more thought before Bella awoke. It was just, I was so consumed at the time with fear that something was wrong, that she would never wake. The idea that she would actually be okay seemed like a distant miracle. Now that she was actually here, I was unprepared to deal with the more difficult realities of her newborn status. To deny Bella this hurt. I looked at Carlyle unhappily. His eyes were serious. "It's for the best. Be gentle, Edward." I looked back at Bella, keeping my expression calm. "Bella, that's not really a good idea." As much as I hated keeping her from her own child, I knew that Bella would want to protect Renesmee at any cost, even from herself. I kept my voice soothing. "She's half human, love. Her heart beats, and blood runs in her veins. Until your thirst is positively under control, you don't want to put her in danger, do you?" The corners of Bella's lips turned down unhappily, her mind working behind her eyes.
"Oh, dear,"
thought Esme despondently, her emotions roiling. She was crushed by the pain in Bella's face, understanding how awful it would be to be kept from your own child.
"Where is she?"
asked Bella. "In Jacob's arms," I thought with irritation, but I could not say this aloud. There was no way Bella could handle the shock of learning about the imprint right now, and I had told Jacob I wouldn't tell her. I didn't know if it would be possible to avoid divulging the information, though, in the end. Jacob was listening anxiously, a sleeping Renesmee clutched close, his mind racing with how to handle the possibility that I would allow Bella to see Renesmee now. How foolish did he think I was?
Is Rosalie with her?
Yes. My voice was laced with irritation.
But not the only one.
Rosalie was sitting next to Jacob, listening intently, while glaring daggers at him. Relax, thought Jasper. Get her out of here before she escalates, Edward. It's not safe. Anxiety was seeping out of Bella, although Alice didn't see her losing control. I gently removed one of the hands pressed against where Renesmee used to be and tried to pull her towards the window again. She resisted.
Wait.
I paused as the stress level in the room began to rise. Everyone had been going along so smoothly, so much more than we could have hoped for, but this might be the point when things went astray.
What about Jacob and Charlie? Tell me everything that I missed. How long was I unconscious?
How the hell is she worrying about these things? Emmett wondered. Jesus, when I first changed, I didn't give a damn about anything except blood. His eyes flickered to the door for a moment. And Rosalie? Carlyle met my eyes. All of it will be too much for her to handle right now, but I don't think she will leave until we alleviate some of her concerns, and she deserves information.
What's wrong?
Bella whispered, her face worried. Carlyle and I instantly smoothed our expressions. Nothing is wrong, Carlyle said adamantly. Not exactly, he thought, thinking of the imprinting and Nessie's growth. I realized suddenly that just Renesmee's physical change over the last 2 days alone would be a terrible shock for Bella. Nothing has changed much, actually. You were only unaware for just over 2 days. It was very fast, as these things go. Edward did an excellent job, quite innovative. The venom injection straight into your heart was his idea. He smiled proudly at me. I told you, you did everything right, better than right. Look at her. He paused, thinking how to answer her questions in the least upsetting way. Jacob is still here, and Charlie still believes you're sick. He thinks you're in Atlanta right now, undergoing tests at the CDC. We gave him a bad number, and he's frustrated. He's been speaking with Esme. Esme shuddered, remembering the borderline hysteria in Charlie's voice during their last phone call.
I should call him,
Bella murmured. No.
No.
No. Every mind in the house had the same reaction, even Jacob, who was shocked by the unfamiliar ring of her voice. His thoughts were swimming with a mixture of curiosity and dread at seeing what she actually looked like.
Hold on. Jacob is still here?
Bella said suddenly, her voice unbelieving. I frowned, wondering how much to tell her. You promised Jacob, Edward. Carlyle's eyes met mine briefly. I would keep that promise, but only if it didn't hurt Bella, and right now that information was just too much. Bella, I said, there's much to discuss, but we should take care of you first. You have to be in pain.
But Jacob...
We have all the time in the world for explanations, love, I said softly. Forever. Her eyes calmed a little.
Okay. Hey!
Alice thought. She had been standing quietly by the door, concentrating on the future, but now she bounded towards us, stopping at Jasper's side.
Wait,
she cried.
You promised I could be there for the first time. What if you run past something reflective?
Alice, I said with a frown. Couldn't she see that we had to get Bella out of here?
Don't ruin this for me.
She glared.
It will only take a second.
She bounded out of the room, and I sighed. Alice hated when her visions didn't come to pass, at least the good ones.
What is she talking about?
Asked Bella. Her question was answered when Alice reappeared with the large mirror from Rosalie's room. As she moved towards us, Jasper trailed behind her, his eyes intent on Bella. I suddenly felt protective of my wife, uncomfortable with his intense scrutiny and suspicion, even though I knew it was necessary. But then his thoughts refocused. He caught a wave of emotion from Bella. Shock quickly morphed into a defensive wariness within her. I glanced at Bella, whose eyes were wide and alert, as she raked over the ruined skin of Jasper's face and neck. I realized for the first time she could see the scars of his past in the truest physical sense. She sees me now for what I really am, thought Jasper. The corners of his mouth lifted into a slightly cynical smile. No, what you were once, I wanted to tell him.
Edward gave me grief for not getting you a mirror before the wedding,
I heard Alice say.
I'm not going to be chewed out again.
Chewed out? I muttered, glancing at her questioningly. I hardly remembered discussing it at all.
Maybe I'm overstating things.
She shrugged, adjusting the mirror. And maybe this has solely to do with your own voyeuristic gratification. Alice smiled slightly, meeting my eyes.
See, that's why this vision was always so clear. It was all about me.
She winked. I rolled my eyes, turning back to Bella, and then froze. She was standing perfectly still, staring at the mirror, her gaze cautious and uncertain. I watched her face, suddenly worried, waiting for her reaction to the physical changes that occurred while she slept.
Edward,
thought Alice. I looked through her eyes and realized I was looking at the fruition of her vision. Bella standing, flawless, her eyes weary, my expression stiff, uncertain, watching her. Alice next to her, smiling, glowing, with Jasper at her shoulder, his eyes always on Bella, my family in the background. I refocused on the scene through my own eyes and watched as Bella's emotions played across her expression. Pleasure flitted briefly across her face and then was quickly gone, replaced by a dismayed horror. Her emotions are fueling up, Jasper thought. She's upset. Damn it, why couldn't Alice just let us leave?
The eyes,
Bella whispered, her voice breaking slightly.
How long?
They'll darken up in a few months, I said softly. Animal blood dilutes the color more quickly than a diet of human blood. They'll turn amber first, then gold. They'll be just as beautiful as they always were. Bella's body visibly stiffened, the red eyes that had upset her burning even brighter, and Jasper's stress level began to ratchet upward in response to her increasing tension.
Months?
Bella's voice was high and loud. Anxiety flooded out of her and into Jasper. He took a step forward in alarm. She's too agitated, he warned. She won't be able to bring this back down. Get ready. I'm going to send out a blast of calm. If necessary, wrap your arms around her so I can touch her. Alice's mind raced with visions.
No, she's fine. I don't see anything changing. She's out the window, jumping the river.
And so the fun begins, Emmett thought cheerfully, angling his body slightly in front of Esme. And then suddenly, Bella took a slow, deep breath. I watched as her eyes tempered, and the tension eased slowly out of Jasper's mind. Alice came back to the present, smiling contentedly.
No, I'm fine,
Bella said, her voice slightly wavering.
It's just a lot to take in.
That it is, thought Carlyle, feeling a rush of pride at how well she was handling herself. How the hell did she regain control like that? Thought Jasper, almost sounding irritated. She should have snapped. I've seen it 1,000 times. How? I don't know, I said softly. I didn't have Jasper's experience with newborns, but the ones I had known, much of my family, including myself, couldn't hold it together over anything. We had all been a wild, thirsty, dangerous mess. Bella's eyebrows pulled together.
What question did I miss?
I smiled. Jasper's wondering how you're doing it.
Doing what?
Controlling your emotions, Bella, Jasper responded. I've never seen a newborn do that, stop an emotion in its tracks that way. You were upset, but when you saw our concern, you reined it in, regained power over yourself. I was prepared to help, but you didn't need it."
"Is that wrong?"
she asked, tensing again. "No," said Jasper. "I don't think so." He wasn't sure if all this calm was building up to some sort of monumental breakdown. I wished he would take it at face value. She was doing incredible, even if it might be short-lived. I ran my hand down her bare arm. "It's very impressive, but we don't understand it. We don't know how long it can hold."
"But what do you think?"
Alice said, gesturing towards the mirror.
"Stop distracting her with all your unnecessary worrying." "I'm not really sure,"
Bella whispered, staring at her reflection. She examined herself closely, a mixture of emotions in her eyes. I wanted to know what she was thinking. Did she hate the unfamiliar face? Did she regret the loss of her human features? She lifted a hand up very slowly, touching her face, as if confirming what she saw in the mirror was real. Her expression was unreadable. "Say something," I thought desperately. "Please tell me what you're thinking." I remembered my half-hope that I might be able to read her thoughts once she became more like me. That, obviously, was never going to come to be. She was as closed off to me as ever. I sighed, and her eyes slid over to my face.
"Disappointed?"
she asked, her voice flat. I laughed slightly. "Yes." Surprise flashed across her face before hurt filled her eyes. Alice snarled quietly.
"Jerk?"
Jasper hovered, waiting. I ignored them, laughing lightly, because this was the typical reaction of the Bella I knew and loved, and I was nearly giddy to have her back again. How could she possibly think that I would ever be even remotely disappointed by how she looked, or with anything about her? But of course she did. I wrapped my arms around her waist, sturdy beneath my hands, and pulled her close, pressing my lips to her polished cheek. "I was rather hoping that I'd be able to hear your mind, now that it's more similar to my own," I said quietly. "And here I am, as frustrated as ever, wondering what could possibly be going on inside your head." I felt the tension leave her body.
"Oh well,"
she said, and there was a hint of relief in her voice that led me to believe that she was glad I still didn't have access to her thoughts.
"I guess my brain will never work right. At least I'm pretty."
I rolled my eyes, and then leaned down close to her ear. "Bella, you have never been merely pretty." "Enough with the damned games, Edward. Let's go. Are you just asking for trouble?" I sighed, pulling back, but keeping my eyes on Bella. All right, all right."
"What?"
she asked. "You're making Jasper more edgy by the second. He may relax a little when you've hunted." Bella glanced at Jasper.
"Okay, let's hunt."
She easily pulled my arms from around her body, surprising me, and took one of my hands. She turned, and I pulled her over to the window. I undid the latch, swinging it open. They were designed for easy access. She stepped forward and stared down. Behind her, Jasper gave Alice a soft kiss on the cheek and moved forward. "Should we take Emmett with us?" he wondered, looking at me. "Or maybe Carlyle. Em will probably just find a way to get her riled up." Alice's mind filled then with a vision of the forest, Bella kneeling on the ground over what appeared to be an elk carcass. Her dress was slightly ripped and bloody. Carlyle and Jasper stood about 100 yards away, arms crossed, watching her carefully. My body tightened suddenly at this picture, the realization coming down in a rush that this was a private moment, and I didn't want anyone there but myself. I didn't want them watching. I wanted to take Bella on her first hunt alone. I shook my head slightly at Jasper, and he frowned. "Don't be an idiot, Edward," he thought. "It's foolish to take her out by herself. She'll snap, and you'll need help." I didn't agree. I had already been able to calm her down several times myself, and even with her newborn strength, I would be faster. Deep in the woods, if I used caution, things would be fine. I shook my head again, and he glared. I looked back at Bella. She was still staring down.
The window?
She asked. I smiled. Had she never realized how often we exited through the windows? Maybe she thought I only did it from her room. The large windows weren't just for looks, although Esme might disagree. It's the most convenient exit. If you're frightened, I can carry you.
We have all eternity, and you're worried about the time it would take to walk to the back door?
She said, a slight sarcastic edge to her voice. The smile fell from my face as I tried to imagine the logistics of getting her downstairs without another struggle about seeing the baby. Renesmee and Jacob are downstairs. Sadness and fear crossed her face.
Is Renesmee okay with Jacob?
She whispered.
He doesn't like her very much.
I tried not to laugh at her very understandable misinterpretation of the situation. Trust me, she is perfectly safe. I know exactly what Jacob is thinking. Right now, his little brain was still buzzing with ways to keep Renesmee safe from Bella. I might have to kill him, finally, if he interfered in any way. He heard my words, quickly rerouting his thoughts. Thanks for not telling her, Edward.
Of course,
Bella said softly, looking back down at the ground. I smiled. I knew she could do this. She had absolutely no idea yet of the incredible power of her body and mind. I couldn't wait to teach her. Stalling? I asked daringly.
A little,
she murmured.
I don't know how.
Emmett's head suddenly filled with the image of Bella tripping on the window ledge and falling out head first. He laughed out loud. Might be safest for everyone if you just carried her, Edward. Or maybe I should head down and catch her. I ignored him.
Help her, Edward,
thought Esme. Watch me, I said. I stepped slowly out of the window. This would be the easiest way for her to start. Generally, we jumped. There was a running competition of who could get closest to the river. I was the current champion, but this seemed like the wrong moment to boast about it. I adjusted my feet as I fell to where I wanted them to land, bending my knees just slightly as I hit the ground so that my landing would be almost silent. I looked back up at her. I could see she had been carefully studying my movements. She pursed her lips and with a grim expression on her face stepped out of the window. I watched with pleasure as wonder filled her face as she fell. She held her body with remarkable ease, the dress flowing in waves from the wind created by her movement through the air. Her hands lifted delicately at the wrist. She came down on the balls of her feet, just the faintest whisper of impact, and then she straightened up and looked at me. She was the most amazing creature I had ever seen. She smiled.
Right. Easy.
Bella, I smiled back.
Yes?
That was quite graceful, even for a vampire. My entire family had stepped forward to watch Bella's fall. What fun was that? Emmett grumbled. This whole thing is turning out to be a bust. Bella beamed.
Thank you.
Then she bent over swiftly, scooping the stiletto shoes off her feet and whipping them back into the window.
Hey,
Alice thought, jumping into the air to catch them before they could hit the wall and get ruined.
Her fashion sense hasn't improved as much as her balance,
she said irritably. I smiled to myself, pleased and comforted to see another familiar piece of my Bella. She had always shown a disdain for Alice's high fashion, although I had rather liked the shoes. I grabbed her hand and pulled her down towards the river. She would have to jump this unless she wanted to swim. My family stood at the window, watching us go. Jacob and Rosalie had moved to the back windows as well. Jacob was watching intently, Renesmee still asleep in his arms, both fascinated and hesitant to see Bella. Be careful and be safe, son, Carlyle called mentally. Good luck, thought Jasper. You'll need it.
Are we swimming?
Asked Bella as we neared the water. I smiled. And ruin your pretty dress? No, We're jumping."
"Thank you,"
thought Alice. Bella regarded the river, looking concerned.
"You first,"
she said. I stroked a finger down her cheek and then backed up a couple of steps. Jumping was fun, but it could be difficult, in the beginning, to judge the strength needed to go certain distances. Aiming for just into the trees on the other side, I ran a couple of steps forward, lifted off with one foot, and vaulted over the river. Feeling the eyes of my family all watching me, I turned a quick somersault before I went into the trees.
"So typical,"
thought Rosalie.
"Just couldn't help himself."
"Show off," I heard Bella mumble from across the river, and I laughed. Peering through the trees, I watched as Bella backed up, way too far. I started to back further into the forest. Just as I lost sight of her, I heard a tearing sound. Sprinting a few paces forward, I could make her out, looking down at her leg with a mixture of annoyance and chagrin. Her dress had split right up her thigh. As I waited to see what she would do, Bella's expression suddenly cleared, and with just the slightest smile, she reached down with her hands and split the dress up the remainder of her thigh. Then she did the same to the other side. She bent a knee, exposing flawless white skin, like porcelain snow at dawn. My breath caught in my throat.
"Does she have any idea who designed that dress?"
Alice ground her teeth in frustration. Bella smiled widely, and my watching family laughed, including Jacob. "Some things don't change," he mused with a smile. "I could have told him she'd hate that dress." "Nice," thought Emmett appreciatively. Both of my brothers were watching with interest, their gazes appraising. I glared at them through the trees, and then stepped forward, ready to get Bella to myself. "Bella," I called, "do you want to watch again?" She breathed deeply, and then with one long step, launched off the river's edge. I could see immediately, given her trajectory and velocity, that she was going to overshoot the jump. I began to run back, desperately trying to judge where she would land. Worry was ridiculous. She couldn't hurt herself if she wanted. More likely, she would hurt a tree. But my mind just couldn't fathom it, and the distance of her jump might terrify her, or rattle her already precarious mood. I heard her fall softly into the trees, catching a branch, and as I tracked her down, she unexpectedly broke into a delighted laughter. She was in a large pine. I looked up at her amazed. She wasn't frightened or confused. She was exhilarated, her eyes dancing, a delighted smile on her face. She didn't seem to be agitated at all by the unfamiliar strength of her new body, or even remotely concerned about any discomfort from thirst. She leapt down nimbly, and I resisted the urge to reach out and catch her in my arms.
"Was that good?"
she asked, her eyes shining. "Very good."
"Can we do it again?"
"Focus, Bella. We're on a hunting trip."
"Oh, right,"
she said with a nod.
"Hunting."
I nearly rolled my eyes. Where did she get this control? Only a 20-minute-old newborn, and she acted like needing to hunt was just an annoying distraction. She should be going out of her mind with thirst. I wondered what would happen when she really caught the scent of blood. "Follow me, if you can." I smiled, teasing her, and then turned and ran into the forest, knowing she would follow. It felt incredible to run again. The last time I had run in this forest, I had been in the bowels of hell, alienated from Bella, sick with fear and guilt, scrutinized by my family. Now I felt weightless with happiness. I ran at a steady pace, slightly slower than normal, to be sure Bella could keep up with me. I listened closely as she ran behind me, for any sign that she might unexpectedly veer off path, but she kept right on my heels. Soon her laughter echoed through the trees, cascading chimes of delight and freedom. I couldn't hold back my own smile. Running was one of my greatest joys, and to now truly share it with her was simply astonishing. I sensed Bella putting on a burst of speed, trying to catch me, and I slowed subtly, Her face was glowing as she passed me, and so I let her pull ahead. Giving her happiness was all I ever wanted to do. She leapt with long, graceful strides, an elegant gazelle, and I drank in the sight of her. I waited for her to slow, to become agitated or distracted, but she continued with her feverish pace. Soon we drew near to a watering hole my family frequented, where elk always seemed to be available and plentiful. I could hear a small herd of 5 there now. I stopped and watched her for a fraction of a second to see if she would notice. As she disappeared into the trees, I called out to her, "Bella!" She continued forward for another second, and suddenly a thrill of fear shot through my body. Just as I was about to break forward to catch up with her, she stopped, twirling on one foot and dancing back to me. I smiled with relief, waiting for her to speak, but she just stared at me. "Did you want to stay in the country?" I asked. I probably shouldn't tell her I would have happily followed her across the continent. Or were you planning to continue on to Canada this afternoon?
"This is fine,"
she said absently, her eyes seeming to fix on my lips.
"What are we hunting?"
"Elk." I remembered Alice's vision of Bella with an elk. "I thought something easy for your first time." Bella's forehead wrinkled as she glared at me. Obviously, she thought she didn't need easy. But then her expression tightened, and her eyes blazed with a sudden red fire. Thirst was finally getting the better of her.
"Where?"
she said anxiously, her head swinging quickly back and forth. The stream was only 20 yards away. If she concentrated properly, she would sense the elk. I touched her shoulders lightly. "Hold still for a moment." Her body stilled beneath my hands. "Now close your eyes," I said softly. Her eyelids lowered obediently, and suddenly there was the sleeping face that had been with me the last couple of days. I placed my hands on her cheeks, caressing her skin with my thumbs. "Listen. What do you hear?" I stilled my hands and waited. For a moment her face was completely motionless. Then her lips parted slightly, and her eyes creased in concentration. After another moment, there was the tightening again, the thirst. She must have heard the elk, the steady thrumming of their hearts. Fire suddenly ripped down my own throat, venom acidic in my mouth. It had been a very long time.
"By the creek, to the northeast?"
she murmured. "Yes." Her pinpointing of the direction was uncanny for her first time. "Now, wait for the breeze again. And what do you smell?" It was another moment or two before a light breeze ruffled her hair gently. She inhaled deeply, once, twice. I inhaled along with her, the elk scent rich and familiar. Bella's expression suddenly shifted, looking slightly distasteful. I laughed. I had long since grown accustomed to the scent of animal blood, but I remembered Carlyle patiently tolerating numerous complaints from me during my newborn stage. "I know. It takes some getting used to."
"3?"
Bella asked. "Close. 5. There are 2 more in the trees behind them."
"What do I do now?"
she asked, her expression slightly bewildered. "Follow your instincts, love." "What do you feel like doing?" I breathed. She inhaled briefly again, and then her body stiffened. Her eyes shot open, and I saw the glaze of thirst in them. She looked at me almost without seeing me. Her body was ready to take over. "Don't think about it," I said, removing my hands and stepping away carefully, not wanting to interfere in the moment. "Just follow your instincts." Bella turned from me, and her eyes became completely unfocused. I smiled, pleased she had been able to give herself completely over to her senses. I followed behind her as she flowed in and out of the trees, pulled towards the increasing scent as a moth to the flame. I kept a good distance between us, not wanting to spark a defensive response. We came upon the clearing, catching the male still at the stream, as 4 does moved gracefully back into the trees. I paused at the edge, watching Bella position herself by the male. Normally, with my brothers, we would spook the herd first. The kill was all the better with the chase, but now was not the time for games. Her body was a vision of stealth and power as she tensed, crouching automatically for the strike, the lean muscles of her legs drawing my eyes. Then she took off, but immediately I could tell her path was wrong. She would miss the buck completely. Oh shit.